Hello, everyone. This is Matt Gunlock from the 3GIQ podcast. I'm joined here today with my co-host, Frank Gow. And then I have two very special guests. I have Donna Aberly and I have JK Khan. This episode I'm really excited to do because it's kind of the coming back of the Duskin three-gun match. Before we really start getting into that match itself and going over the history of it and why it's so special, Donna, can you start out by introducing yourself? And then JK, whenever she's done, can you tell us about yourself as well?
So thanks, Matt. Donna Eberly. I live currently in Ashburn, Virginia, though I tried to convince my husband, Will, for many years that we should be in North Carolina. I actually have kind of a weird background as far as with shooting. Grew up in New Jersey, moved to Virginia Beach. I was working for my entire career I've been doing tactical sales to the military, and in 2013 I was working for a company, Electric Fuel Battery, and we were at a trade show down at Fort Bragg. And prior to this, I didn't grow up in a family that hunted. I never had been exposed to firearms at all, never even seen one in person. So after this trade show at Bragg, there was a range day, and it was over at Frankie McRae's PSR 37. And they had what they kind of advertised as a Green Beret helping out new shooters. And so I'm hanging out, and Clay Martin is helping, people who haven't shot before. And at some point he pulls me aside and says, "Would you want to learn how to shoot?" Which, not knowing, you're like, okay, what's this guy's angle? Like, this is really creepy. But my boss ended up, being protective, vetted him, and they're like, no, he's a stand-up guy. So flash forward, from there, I started hanging out at some local matches. I was always back and forth between Virginia Beach and Bragg for work. Actually learned how to shoot for the very first time. Was very fortunate from Clay and Eric Eckhart. Tagged along to a couple matches. Eventually met my now husband, Will Eberly, who retired out of third. Was just welcomed with open arms in the community. Got spoiled shooting out at Damon Woodall's place with his fancy
good old Tar Heel three gun.
Yep, precision rifles. And then I remember when I finally got my first rifle, my Barnes, which is still the one and only one I use to this day. I remember opening the box and being like, where is everything? Because I'm used to shooting woodies, tricked out thing. And I really honestly thought I had ordered the wrong thing. I shot my first three gun in 2015. It was the Tar Heel match. More than the sport, I fell in love with the community. It's how I met my best friends. It ultimately led to me meeting my husband. I can't say enough about it. And so taking on the Duskin three gun and being able to promote that has been an honor. And that's pretty much my story.
JK?
Hey, so Jonathan Kahn, I go by JK. It's kind of a long story, not really long, but that's what I end up going by. Grew up mainly most of my time in North Carolina and Texas. I was born in Virginia, but my mom was from North Carolina, so that's kind of what brought us here. And then my dad, a lot of his family was in Texas. And then when they split up, when I was like 9, I kind of just bounced back and forth from both. But predominantly here in North Carolina. As far as occupation, before I joined the Army, I worked with Walmart Distribution Logistics for a while, but been in the Army for 17 years. Spent about 6 of that in the infantry, and then been in Special Forces, the Green Beret, for about going on 10 years now, 10 or 11 years, 11. But as far as how I got into three gun, actually the Duskin, 2017 Duskin was my first match I ever shot. I think that I actually went back on practice score and looked that year. I shot at Carolina three gun, which is Zeus City Armory now, out there, good group of guys. And then I shot at Tar Heel three gun Woodies. And then I think 2018, 19, 18, I shot the Duskin again that year, which was the last year it was held. And then shot 2 more times that year out at Carolina three gun. And then 2019, I think I shot one match, and then I was deployed most of that year in Syria. And then really after that, it was just kind of something I tried to do. I loved it. 2017, I fell in love with it whenever I shot it, the Duskin. And it was one of the things I really just didn't have a lot of time because I was on a team then. And then around 2020, right there at the beginning when I got back, is right kind of when COVID hit. I basically started going through my divorce, and then that same week they basically pulled me off my team to go be a first sergeant, which I left kicking and screaming. And then it was a lot of life changes all at once, and then I kind of found myself with a lot of time and not knowing what to do with it. And then and then I was dealing with a lot of other stressors in life too, but basically I turned a 3-gun at that point. I was like, hey, I've always wanted to do this. I got the time now to do it. And at first it was like, for me, it was like, I'm competitive. A lot of us are, that are in my occupation, or just in the military in general. So for me, it was like, how good can I get, and so that's what I turned to. And then it went from, wanting to compete, then kind of like Donna said, fall in love with the community. Honestly, all the friends that I have now are because of the sport and getting in a 3-gun, Hutch, Jason Byerly, Chris Brower, just all of those, everybody, Donnie Flo, Dave Harris, freaking Mitch Cox, I've met all you guys through 3-gun. So, and just after that, it's just been a wild ride. It's pretty much all I do in my spare time now. So.
No, you're right. The community, I've never met a community as awesome as the 3-gun community. Tactical games community has great people. I love them too, but I'll always revert back to my roots of the 3-gun crew, especially Chris Hutchinson, Chris Brower, and Jason Byerly, just all around solid people, and I love them to death. So let's start out with this because this is about the Duskin match. But before we can talk about the Duskin match, we need to talk about who Mike Duskin is. Donna, if you could, please talk about that.
So funny enough, I guess really a word for it. I never had the opportunity or honor to meet Mike. And I sometimes forget that just through my involvement with the Duskin 3-gun, which I think says we must be doing something right. If you can be a part of this and get the sense that you knew him. So a lot of what I know from Mike is from other people and largely from my husband. So kind of picked his brain on his background with Mike, which I'd like the opportunity to share. I'll try to, it's unpacking a lot of years. So I'm gonna try to consolidate, but basically Mike, obviously in stature, was a giant of a man. He was 6'7", 300 pounds, also a phenomenal shooter. He finished out his enlistment with Ranger Regiment and transitioned to SF National Guard. He deployed with them after 9/11. After that deployment, he decided to go back to active duty, where he joined 3rd Group. Besides a short stint as an instructor at the JFK Special Warfare Center, he spent the rest of his career in 3rd. He was killed October 23rd, 2012 in Wardak, Afghanistan, chasing down 3 insurgents, and legendary last words over radio were, "I'm putting rounds up their asses." He has, survived wife Maggie, 3 kids who, come out to the match. And, if you've ever met Maggie, Lexi, Nate, or Jake, you're instantly family with them. Imagine, Mike was the same way. So my husband, Will, first met Mike, and everything, we say about the 3-gun community, my husband had the exact same experience. And so this kind of echoes that, but he met Mike at the 2009 Fort Benning match. It was Will, his very first time shooting 3-gun. Up until then, he started shooting competitively, mostly USPSA, but right before starting the Q course, he decided to give 3-gun a shot. He was actually squatted with Mike and Jeff Gerwich. And funny enough, Mike actually DQ'd about halfway through that match. But what really struck Will was what a great sport he was. He stayed through the match, stayed with his squad, offering support, advice, resetting, which is something that we all know sometimes experienced shooters kind of forget. But Mike wasn't above that. Obviously, first impression is, damn, this guy is huge. He had a low, deep voice, seemed imposing, but you know, immediately his friendly demeanor just put you at ease. The warmth especially came through when he was doing something he loved, like shooting or working out. And it was, you know, Will says it was SF guys like Mike, who he met in his early days of competitive shooting, who actually solidified his desire to go into SF. Another one of those guys was Tung Nguyen, who we've also honored at matches in the past. You know, he would run into Tung at matches. And as a young infantry officer, there were all these people who shaped him, who he didn't recognize at the time, but are legends in the shooting community. He said Pat McNamara used to hand him full 1911 mags at matches because, you know, when Will only had 2 mags for his 1911. And during another match, one of the guys trying to help him clean up his reloads ended up being Kyle Lamb. So he was super fortunate that his experience in the shooting and SF communities were shaped by some of the most legendary shooters. So Will went to the Q course, realized quickly how little shooting was, you know, they actually got to do during qualification. They started a little informal gun club with other guys who were going through the Q course where they would shoot local matches on the weekend. He graduates, goes to 3rd group, immediately deploys. When he checks into 3rd group, he meets the battalion commander, tells him he's going to 3113, and he finds out his warrant is going to be Mike Duskin. So obviously it was great to have a known face. Mike was super supportive in helping him figure out what to pack and provided a lot of good advice. And one of the first funny stories he tells me, which I think kind of captures Mike, is Will shows up, he's super excited, he's officially a soft guy, he can have a couple of his own tough boxes, which was, you know, a huge improvement from infantry. So Will shows up with 2 tough boxes worth of stuff. Mike has 4, plus a whole bunch of other cases of shit and 200-pound dumbbells, which now Will is finding himself having to lug these dumbbells as they fly on multiple planes and having to palletize and unpalletize their stuff. And the whole time Will's thinking, holy shit, do we not have gym equipment, and who is using these anyway? When they get to where they're going, Will's detachment commander meets another giant guy, Doug Floyd. And Mike tells Doug, hey, I brought us an extra set of 100-pound dumbbells. And that's when Will realized it was an extra set. They already had some there. And Doug just replied, great thinking, now we won't have to wait. So, I mean, that just kind of, which is, you know, Mike's love of, you know, all things working out and fitness is something, you know, we've kind of played with as far as honoring in the match. But, you know,
yes, we did.
Yes.
JK.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a ton of other SF guys who are also great shooters, who, you know, unfortunately died in combat. So it's not like Mike's the only one, but what set him apart in creating this match was how much he encouraged guys to improve themselves through competitive shooting. One of the points Mike made that sticks with Will is early on, you got a lot of SF guys who on patrol don't necessarily bring their pistol with them. They'll bring the rifle just because that's what they're more comfortable with. And they view their pistol, especially on dismounted ops, as just extra weight. But Mike had this saying that a pistol and grenade are 2 tools that when you need them, nothing else will suffice. And Will didn't know any better, so he took him up on that. And those are two things that he's used several times in critical moments. One of which, Matt, if you want to go into this dump truck.
Yes,
mission.
please.
Perfect example of this importance. So the dump truck op, I've heard about it even before I met my husband. It's always this kind of weird folk legend. You know, you don't always get the whole story, but it's like people speak about it, you know, as this big thing. And it was actually stage 1, right, JK? It was won this year was based off
No,
this
it's state.
Page
Was it?
one.
Yep, yep, yep.
It was
So,
yeah, started in the back of the box truck.
yeah.
That was kind of like me paying homage, to that op.
So here's the dump truck op. So basically, their team decides to conduct a recon of a Taliban-controlled area. They decide to use a small blue dump truck that was kind of, common in that part of the area. And they decide they're going to get close by disguising themselves. So if you can imagine, you have an interpreter from Kandahar who's driving. The plan is Will's going to be up front. Will doesn't immediately scream American in his look. So they decide he'll be up front dressed as a chai boy. And which wasn't really hard to pull off. Then the plan was you'd have Mike and Johnny Rogers, also a massive dude, in the back, posed as Afghan women. Now you can imagine a challenge here is finding burqas to fit these two giant dudes. So one of the funny things the interpreters recounted is, he's in town trying to get, procure these burqas, and the shopkeeper's just laughing at him, saying, about his affinity for very large women, as he's trying to get burqas for these over 6 foot tall dudes. So Mike and Johnny end up in the back under burqas, and Dareth Cooley and Desat A are under tarp. Basically, during the op, they get stopped at Taliban checkpoint. They realize they've been soft compromised. And as things escalate, the team opens fire, kill 5 of the Taliban at the checkpoint. The plan was that anyone killed would be, as they're trying to figure out what are they going to do with them, Mike's like, we'll just chuck them in the truck. No big deal. Like, throw them in the truck. I got it. Don't worry. Well, these particular Taliban guys were huge, nearly obese. So if you can imagine this picture, Mike and Dareth are trying to throw these guys in the back of the truck. Their pants have fallen down. There's nothing underneath. They're struggling in these burqas to get these guys in the back of the truck. And essentially, Mike's biggest obstacle is trying not to get genitals in his face. So the team got in trouble for it, but it was kind of swept under the rug. And all of these elements kind of add to this mystique and legend amongst guys in third group. And at Spalk, Clay Martin would use this story when teaching pistol, again, pointing out the importance. And it's funny because Will ended up, his primary weapon in that was pistol, just as Mike kind of almost foreshadowed. And Clay, when he was teaching at Spalk, was, also trying to hit home the importance of, your pistol as a weapon that's really used. It would tell the story. And when he told it, I don't know if you know Clay Martin, but he would always, as it got to the story's climax, say, "Surprise, cockbags," the quote from Team America. And that was actually something I mentioned to JK when we were talking about this, but for obvious reasons that couldn't really use that as the stage name. But if you know Clay, you can you hear him saying that in your head. So basically that was the dump truck op. And then for Mike, they deployed in August 2012. They were clearing out the Chalk Valley. Riley Stevens had just been killed, so they were even more motivated to get out there. They went and linked up with a couple other ODAs. It was the first time doing a multi-commando op. Will was 2 kilometers down the valley from where Mike was, and he remembers hearing over the radio that Mike had gotten hit and the call for the medevac. So, Will and them fly out to Firebase Shank, and he remembers when he gets there, everyone just assumed Mike was wounded. Will asked one of the B team guys, how he's doing, and he found out he had passed. And I think what was pretty telling is, for Will and most of the guys, Mike was this giant, larger than life, lethal, fearless, seemingly indestructible dude who had done hundreds, maybe even thousands of missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. And for these guys who, young SF guys who, feel invincible, it was such a gut punch to your sense of immortality, or your sense of your mortality. Mike's death really shook all of them with the thought that if it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. So when they get back, they wanted a way to honor Mike. They were basically told, what you guys want to do, it's impossible. You'll never get approval. It'll never happen, being able to hold a match on post, which of course motivated them even more. So the first, and Matt, do you want to just go right? It's just the first match.
Yes.
So to summarize, first match was in 2013, and it was Will and Eric Eckhart. 90% of the effort, which doesn't seem to change much each year, is focused on getting the 3-star approval for it to happen. They had about 70 shooters. There were 5 stages, and it's funny because it ended up almost like a potluck, like, hey, bring your own item for the prize table. There was some like demo stuff from some of the Surefire guys, like just haphazard kind of bring things to share. The match always had a memorial aspect to it, whether it was each stage honoring an individual or a group. And then 2015, Jim Rooney, who was Mike's team sergeant when he was killed, and Eric Eckhart again. It happened, it was followed up in 2015. That year, Will went out to SHOT Show and was trying to actually get some sort of organization with the prize table. And then by that point, 2015 was the first match I attended. It was freaking freezing. I was helping with registration and fell in love with the event, and just, you kind of leave on this high that you just want every day to be Duskin match day. So in 2016, Will kind of asked if I wanted to help take over sponsorship. I was already in the industry talking to a lot of these people. There was also a sense of, having activity people, wanting to make that separation with, civilian soliciting sponsorship. So I agreed to take it over. I inherited his 3 business cards and like a 4 contact spreadsheet. And Ben Blanton was the match director that year and the year following. And then in 2018, we had Nate Schuler and TJ. And 2017 was interesting. The match was a month after our wedding. So that was an interesting year. But it was 2016 is when I took over as being, heading up match sponsorship, and I have done it ever since. And I told JK, my intent is, as long as I'm physically able to, nothing's really going to get in my way. It's always priority 1.
No, that's beautiful. I appreciate that.
So you guys have already kind of went into like what makes this match so special. It's a commemoration of a larger than life person, and we'll get into the stage designs later. It sounds like you guys try to honor like specific moments of his history through the stage designs. Want to actually like ask a question directed at JK. You mentioned that your first introduction to 3-gun was in 2017. Did you see, and now you shoot quite regularly. Do you think that this most recent match had the same effect on some of those shooters that came out for the first time, and that you might have like a new cadre of guys who are like getting into 3-gun now?
Oh yeah, 100%. Afterwards, leading up to it, anything you do, you put your best foot forward, but you always want feedback. I was concerned. It's been 4 years since the match happened. I didn't want to be that guy that ruined the Duskin. And I really wanted to, honor the match for what it was, and then pay forward, for what it did for me. I said it at the match. Was given the opening remarks, the opening ceremonies both days. And, I was like, if you'd asked me in 2017 or told me that I'd be running the Duskin in 2022 and bringing it back after a 4-year hiatus, I would have told you were full of shit. But, I was hoping, leading up to it, and then, the day of the match happening, that it would have that effect. And after that, like, undoubtedly I can say 100%, because I've gotten feedback from guys on my social media. Guys have hit me up on the emails. Like, I still check the emails for the, that set up for the Duskin. we're thinking about doing like a second order of shirts, if there's enough interest, and guys when they're like, yeah, 100% I like more shirts. And they're like, hey, once again, phenomenal match. Like, this first match I've shot, I can't wait to get into it. Actually, this last Saturday, a couple of guys that own some of the teams are like, hey, we're going to shoot out in Hope Mills. You want to come out there and shoot with us? I went out there and kind of helped them out, was giving them some stuff. So, I mean, I would say unequivocally, yeah, it's been the same for other people. And the same thing for me when I went and shot it. I consider myself a good shooter. And then the first time I shot the 2017, I was humbled. And I actually had someone that sent me the same exact, response. They were like, hey, yeah, I'd like some more shirts. Great event, great match. It was humbling, but can't wait to do a lot more this year and then, continue to get into the sport. So, I would say, yeah, it was cheap. And that was the goal I wanted, but I didn't think it would hit as many people as it did. So, I'm grateful and thankful for that.
Yeah, and it's great that you guys are providing that avenue for people to get into competitive shooting. North Carolina is such a great scene. So I started shooting when I was in California, and it actually wasn't terrible out there. I just had to show up to my first match and realize that no one actually followed the laws, and then we were fine from there. But with North Carolina being so full of great matches, USPSA 3-gun, we've already talked about some of the things that make Duskin so special and different. The location, the commemorative nature of it. What are some other things that really set Duskin apart from the other 3-gun matches?
Is that for, well, in my opinion.
So,
Hey, Donna, you could go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know if that was like a both question or, well, for one thing, yeah, like you said, Frank, obviously the fact that it's on post. But also, obviously we want to memorialize the fallen, but even if you ask me what our number one goal is, paramount goal, it is to encourage guys to get into 3-gun, but and through that act, we're memorializing. So that, even more is kind of our mission. There's lots of matches that are, memorial, remembering the fallen and honoring, but our core focus is that encouraging people, because, it not only makes them more effective as a soldier, but it gets into this community, which as a civilian, obviously, I can only imagine that the 3-gun community is probably the closest you'll find to your military community. And, serving side by side with people. So especially as guys transition out too, having that community, to fall back on. And another big difference is matches invite only. Obviously, because there's constraints on the number of people we can accommodate. It's hard enough just, getting the people we are able to invite. And because, these limitations increase the cool factor of the match and the exclusivity, but from where I stand too, it's a little limiting with sponsors. So we can't have, the banners, tables set up. So it has to look very much like a military event and not a commercial event, which is limiting, but in the same way, it's a good thing. So I like to always think of this match as more a grassroots version of an event. And, JK and I have talked exhaustively about how it's so important that it always stays that way and protect its kind of integrity and the purity of it.
JK?
Yeah, just kind of going off of what Donna said last part, I think, there's a lot of things that make this match special, but the grassroots portion, it's never going to be the Vortex Duskin 3-gun. And it's not that, we don't, respect and like really appreciate the sponsors that give, but it's so much just the match. What it's, what it really stands for is like, memorializing Mike and the other guys, that have given ultimate sacrifice, but then also just staying true to the heart of like exposing guys to the sport and honoring what Mike wanted, because that was one of the things he thought, working out and getting better at shooting, and competition breeds excellence. So yeah, I totally agree with Donald on that one. I think the other thing that makes it a lot special is there's it's one of those things. There's not a lot of advertisement. You don't see it on practice score. You don't see it. There's not a lot of social media. What we did create with social media, we controlled so it wasn't getting blasted out there, and it's all word of mouth. But there was somebody that was out in I think California and was like, yeah, they had somebody asking me, about the Duskin 3-gun if I knew, how to get into it, and because they'd always heard about it. And it's weird, because it's not like highly publicized, but anybody kind of deep into the 3-gun community or just the shooting community knows about it. It's been around for a while. So I think, that's one of the things. The other one is, it's for the military, it's really special because the way it's designed, and it's we'll probably get into this later when, talking about the match director, but, everything is provided. So the Army guys, they just show up, they can show up with their work guns, unmodified. They don't have to alter them. And the ammo is provided. They just show up and shoot. And it's, to give them that experience of like, hey, this is what it's like to get into, 3-gun. And that's part of the civilian invitees too. It's one to let them experience that side of it and, get that taste of, what we're honoring and, what the community is about. But then also, like Dave Steinbeck, did a special lunchbox. Like I met those guys in 2017. And like, I think our team, like me and a buddy of mine, he was like, hey, you want to go shoot the Duskin, 3-guns in 2017. And I was like, what's 3-gun? He's like, pistol rifle shotgun, man. I was like, cool. So we actually took our, short barrel shotgun to go shoot this match. And then they were like, dude, you're not gonna use that. Here, use this. And James Benelli and he's like, I had like shotgun shells in my dump pouch, and Steinbeck was like, hey man, use this shotgun caddy. So it's almost like a pro-am, too, that makes it kind of special because, these civilian invitees, they mentor and kind of help, the military guys that it's a different style of shooting. So I think that's one of the things that makes it special. And then, in designing the stages, you try to use, and this is kind of more special for, I guess, civilian invitees, but actual stuff that we use within, the military, whether it's assault ladders, fast ropes, things of that nature. So it kind of gives it, something you're not going to see at a lot of other matches, or if any at all. So I think that's one of the things that really makes it there.
So I want to add something too, to what made it so special to me. Like, so on the Marine Corps shooting team, anytime we go to matches, we're constantly trying to help newer shooters, help junior shooters, and we go out and we teach the rest of the Marine Corps the latest innovations and the latest techniques that we learn in competition. So what really made it special to me is we're on a squad with some of the biggest badasses that are out there. You know, and we have, a lot of the civilians out there, they're very skilled, and you have these SF guys that they're being introduced to the shooting sports, and they are just sucking the knowledge up. They're taking everything that you teach and they are applying it on the spot. Your guys are instantly coachable, and that's something that you rarely see, and it just makes it so much more special because as a civilian invitee, you're not just just there to shoot, and if you are just there to shoot, you're there for the wrong reasons. But if you really look at the purpose of the match, you're there encouraging and empowering the people that are in third group and these other SF groups how to become better and more lethal at their jobs.
100%. Yeah.
So Donna, we already kind of answered the next question, which is your capacity, but I want you to talk about the t-shirts.
So when I came on in 2016, there wasn't like, I have a marketing major, and you can imagine in tactical sales that doesn't get to be used a lot. So any chance in my life I have to do anything sort of creative, I'm all about that. So in 2016, I think Ben kind of had a logo as far as like the lambda that he had created that you see on the front of the shirts now, but we didn't have match shirts. There wasn't there wasn't really anything as far as like advertising or, creative side. So I remember like, oh, shirts and, coming up with what could be a logo, what's something, something that can kind of be carried on from year to year. And, I proposed, kind of put together, granted, I don't know Photoshop. So this is like using Word and Paint. This logo of, I saw there's some art of, or graphic design of, a lumberjack punching a bear. And that sparked the original idea. And so each year, basically taking that image of that we turned from the lumberjack to Mike into some, kind of pitch. I'll pitch a couple different ideas to the guys, but it's always the idea that he, Mike is beating up this formidable beast. I had no idea that it would, get the response the shirts have. It's awesome. And, I wouldn't want anything to ever take away from the match, but it's cool how it's kind of helped augment, that mystique and that legendariness of it. So yeah, apart from sponsorships, that was something I brought on in 2016 that I'm super proud of and glad that it's something that makes the match even more memorable.
So let's go through the history of the shirts. The first year you had the lumberjack punching the bear.
Yep, it was in Mike and the Bear. And then 2017 was T-Rex, Mike and the T-Rex. And then the hard thing is we never know 100% if the match is going to happen the next year, because who wants to step up and be the match director? Because, it's pretty rare to get a repeat one once you really experience the full weight of that job, as JK can attest. So it's kind of tricky because, I'm like, do I want to hold on my car? I have an idea for the next shirt, but what if the match doesn't happen? Do I just go ahead and do it now? And I don't even know I couldn't tell you where it came from, but it was the unicorn punch, which seemed to be a big hit. And
that was beautiful. I want one of those shirts.
Oh, taken care of. And then when it came back this year, one of my biggest stresses that kept me up at night, everyone kept, how are you going to top the unicorn? How are you going to top the unicorn? I'm like, so that was an incredible amount of pressure. I'm happy with our outcome. I don't know if we top the unicorn, if it's possible to top a unicorn, but, and the only scary thing about continuing on is for me, is always the damn shirts. Like, gotta get, be better.
I'd honestly say it's there. Like this year's design was there because you took something that is current events and you ran with it and it worked. It was beautiful.
I'll tell you now, it was we had it down to really two good ones. We're not even gonna talk about what the other one was, because I told Donna it's like next year's shirt, because back and forth for a while. I mean, and I'll tell you this, like, I didn't even know Donna before this started. And then, I mean, it was like the last 3 months, like her and I would be on the phone till like midnight, sometimes even later, just going spreadsheets, talking like on the phone. And, the shirts was probably one of the biggest topics because, yeah, I mean, how do you top the unicorn throwing up a rainbow? So I gotta get this right. So there's a lot of sleepless nights for that shirt.
So JK, this being the first time you served as a match director and running such a special match, can you describe the emotions you have from the entire experience and from all the help that you've gotten?
Man, if I had to pick one word, it'd be whirlwind. So I think for you to understand, like, for me, the experience, the emotions, and just everything that I experienced leading up to it, you kind of got to understand, like, why the Duskin is so important to me. Like, when I first shot the Duskin, I love to shoot, I love to work out. I'd always heard about Mike. I was on 3113. I was fortunate enough to like never go to SWIC and spend my whole entire like ODA time on the same ODA for almost 10 years. And it was all in 3113. So I heard a lot about Mike, and like it's you can attest from it from the Jack and Steel stage. I love to lift weights and I love to shoot. So it's like, you know, I never met Mike, but like that's my kind of dude. And so, you know, I shot the 17 and just loved it. You know, love to shoot, you know, love the kind of like lifting weights and, you know, and I fell in love with the sport. And like I said, I didn't get to do it very much. So, you know, we had a pretty rough deployment towards the end. It was just not really like kinetic, but it was just really stressful. And I'm not gonna really get into that. But, you know, I came back and like, as I said before, with all in like a week time, I like hopped into my divorce. And for me, I loved being on ODA. It was the most, you know, most important thing, you know, other than my family that, you know, I had in my life. So that was a very, very tough transition for me, going from being, you know, on a team with 11 brothers to now finding myself sitting in an office, you know, alone. You know, and that whole dynamic really, it was a rough transition. And then dealing, you know, with also, you know, me splitting, you know, with my wife. And then like, you know, I don't hide it anymore. I'm very vocal about it, you know, and then I started noticing some things that like my daughter and like my ex-wife would always bring up, you know, like, hey, you know, you should maybe go talk to somebody here and there. And then, you know, I started realizing like, hey, there's some truth to that. And like just experienced a lot of like depression and anxiety. And so I turned to 3-gun. That was like my therapy, so to speak. And there, like, you know, and I went through a pretty tough time even when I started shooting from 2020 to really about maybe like August of last year. You know, I dealt with a lot of different things, and the sport, you know, really helped me come through that. So it was a very special match when I shot in 17, because it's like, wow, this is great. But then, you know, I don't know where I would be at if it wasn't for 3-gun, because that's what I turned to when I really didn't have much else going for me. And then like all the friends I have now, like I said, are from the sport. So, you know, I really got heavy into it, into 3-gun. And, you know, so that, you know, what it did for me, you know, meant a lot. And then knowing that the Duskin was gone, I really got tied in with some charity organizations, and I met Maggie in December of 20, actually, right before, you know, 2021. Obviously, 20 comes from 21. But anyway, the guy that I met that worked for the charity organization was like, hey, I want you to meet Maggie. And Maggie Duskin, I was like, oh, and then so he kind of like put the bug. He was like, yeah, you know, JK's first startup at HHC Group, you know. And then I got talking to her about, you know, the Duskin, and because I didn't really know how it worked. And, you know, I was like, well, maybe I can like try to like, you know, where I'm at, I've got some influence. Maybe I can see about getting this started. And, you know, so I started like bugging him, prodding up at, you know, group about it. And, you know, finally I started really pressing the issue. Now, like I said, I was dealing with a lot of like personal stuff, you know, and so one, I really didn't know if I was like, you know, prepared to even like do this, if I was in like, you know, the right place. You know, because then I was just like, you know, I once I committed to this, I can't pull out. And really it wasn't catching a lot of traction, but I, you know, pushed it. And finally like 2 months went by, and finally the, you know, the group CSM came. He's like, hey, do we run the Duskin? And I was like, absolutely, 100%. This was in August. And then, so that's when I met Ben Blanton. So anyway, you know, then it was like, really started feeling some pressure, because I was like, oh, wow, you know, but it was so far off. I really didn't kind of sink in just yet, you know? And then I remember going to Benning to shoot the multi-gun there in 2021. And I think that's when I started getting approached by like, you know, a lot of the guys, you know, that have been in the community for a while, like, hey, we heard you're running the Duskin. And so there was a lot of like, what did I get myself into? You know, kind of like, I've never, you know, directed a match before. I've been to a bunch, you know, but there's a lot that goes into that, which, you know, we can get into later if you want. And so honestly, I was kind of intimidated. I was like, oh man, maybe I'm got myself into something that I'm not prepared for. But, you know, it's it's in me to be like, all right, well, you know, whatever, I'm going to put the best foot forward and get 100%. And then I know what I don't know, you know, I'm not afraid to admit. So I'll find people that do know it. I'm, you know, pretty well tied into the community too. So, you know, I knew who to turn to, you know, and I have a lot of friendships built. So leading up to it, man, it was a lot of anxiety. Very overwhelming. It was just like, I got to get this right. It's been 4 years. And so when I finally got the okay to do it, I called Maggie, and it was more of a courtesy and respect thing. It was like, hey, Maggie, look, I've been given the green light to bring this match back. And, I just want to just ask for your blessing. And then, are you okay with that? Me running it. And then she was like, absolutely. And then at this point I had already, did my homework, saw what the calendar was for range 65. And, went ahead and narrowed down the dates when it made sense, when there weren't any classes going on out there. And so she asked me, she was like, hey, JK, well, do you have a time frame? I was like, yeah, I've already got the land, locked in and everything. So that way, if you're good with it, we can do it. She's like, oh, when is it? I was like, June 10th and 11th. She was like, what? And so she kind of said it away. It was like, is something wrong? But then she kind of didn't say that way. And I was like, and I asked her, like, is there something wrong? She was like, that's my birthday, June 10th. And she was like, that would make me so happy to see this match come back on my birthday. That's the best birthday present ever. So now you can imagine already feeling like I'm in over my head, like, oh God, like I really have to get this right. And then, she was like, and it being the 10-year, not on the exact date, but pretty much the 10-year anniversary of him passing. So there was just a lot of expectation, leading this, like everybody wanted the shirt to be awesome. Everybody wanted the match to be like they remembered it. And so it took me a little while to really, curtail all that. And I would say leading up to it was fine because it was all just backside planning, like making sure the paperwork was good, range control was fine, the command was good. Just talking to Donna, like I was helping her a lot, like, because, she was like, hey, it's been a while, what are some companies that are out there now? And so I was kind of feeding her different companies, trying to get her contacts for them. And then, then it came time, I was like, okay, now I really need to start thinking about stages and like the match itself. And then for a while that was a little bit, daunting, trying to actually plan something. I learned a lot. And, Jason Byerly, because I designed a lot, the stages, but then he came out there and was like, all right, man. And believe it or not, like the jacking still got toned down a lot from what it
What?
and,
All
now,
when you end, you have to tell us what it was going to be.
yeah, I'll get into that. And, so, and for a while, first I was like, man, maybe I should just bring somebody in to, and I even told Jason, I was like, hey man, will you design the stages? And then as it started getting closer, I was like, I got this, man. This is the one chance I got. Like, I want to make this what it is, because it gave me so much in my life. And I was like, I want to honor Mike. I want to, give these guys an experience. So, so after that, I just went into it full wind and was just like, all right, I'm going to get this. And at that point, I would say I kind of built my confidence up over the time leading up to it. And then really the last like 4 weeks, man, was just me running. I was out there maybe like the last 2 weeks, maybe 19 hours a day. I'd get out there as soon as the sun was up, building stuff, getting stuff out. I had people out there helping me too. And then right when it got dark, I'd head over to the office and then get on the phone with Donna and we started doing it. And I would say leading up to it, it was just a lot of anxiety. But I'll tell you, when that first round went off that Friday, it was the most rewarding and just like best experience I could imagine. I'm not gonna lie, leading up to it, I was a little bummed I wasn't getting to compete in it and actually shoot it. But then like when it actually started happening, I was like, this is the best feeling ever. And it was, I don't know, humbling, rewarding, just, it was awesome. And I mean, it was really emotional too, because I just sat there and I was like, to hear everybody too, their positive feedback. And, that was my biggest thing, was just being able to give back what this sport has given to me. And I feel like I was able to achieve that. And it was, it was very emotional. Donna, thanks to her, I teared up quite a bit there at the very end. But yeah, I would say up there with like, seeing my kids born and stuff like that, it was one of the most rewarding experiences in my life. I plan to do it again next year, which would be my last year, being able to do it, just because of where my career path's going. But it's, if it's the only one I got to do is this year, like I'll never forget it. It holds a special place in my heart. It really does.
Well, I think I can answer for everybody in saying thank you. And you did do an amazing job. Everything was perfect.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It means a lot. I had a lot of help though. Like, I don't, guys keep beating me over the head. Like, you're the match director, but like, it wouldn't have been what it was without the help that I received. So like, I can't take all that credit. Really can't.
Yeah, just like everything else with the Three Gun community, this match is like a community effort. I mean, Matt, never met you before. I'm like, help, I've got a lot of stuff at the prize table. It's not going to fit in. And he's like, oh, I can come get some. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. You come in my house. No problem. Like, not even a second guess. And just people are just coming out of the woodwork to help. Local stores doing, displays for prize stuff. And it's just another testament to the community in general. And, with JK's story, because I don't really ever know what I'm going to get with the match director. And, I knew he felt a lot of pressure, but from the first conversation we had, and he kind of went into what the sport and the community has meant to him. Like any anxiety I might have had about someone who hadn't been the match director before, it was gone. I knew that no matter what it took, if you're passionate about making the match happen, you'll figure out a way. And so I knew however he got there, it was going to be amazing. And that's all the match really requires. And I know I speak for JK that to be a part, to shoot the match is cool, super cool. To be a part of it's, it actually happening, it's like you hit the lottery. It's so much work and the most work like you ever do, but it's like I will always feel honored that I just stumbled into this and so privileged to have any small part in, in it happening each year.
No, thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah, I'll say meeting Donna, like she's like there'd be some nights I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh my God, like I didn't think about this. And then Donna would be like, oh, I already got that covered. And I'd be like, all right, thank God.
It's funny how much we talked, and then I get out to the range on Wednesday and I'm like, are you JK? Are you JK? Like, I feel like we're practically married at this point. And I've never met the guy. I guess it's like what online dating is like these days. I don't know. But truly, I told him, like, you're bonded for life. This like match director sponsorship role, it's like, again, civilian, but I suppose it's like as close as I could get to having like gone through battle with someone, because in many ways it is.
Yeah.
And I'm already having withdrawals. I'm like, maybe we should schedule like a weekly call, because I'm so used to talking on the phone at all hours. But again, it's these relationships through the community. Like Matt, we've talked a handful of times. Like, yeah. It's just, that's the way it goes.
And I know me, you, and Will are gonna plan on going up to a match somewhere up in this area at some point.
Absolutely.
I better get an invite.
Done.
So you guys have already touched upon this support from the community, but could you tease out some of those like key relationships that really helped make this match happen? And it can be anywhere, be external, within the military chain of command. Donna, we'll start with you.
On my side, so you've got a couple different aspects. So the prize table, our sponsors, obviously by sponsoring the match, you're getting, your item out there. You get to say you supported the Duskin. You get a great group of a very focused audience to see your product. But at the same time, we can't do a lot of marketing, all the things that you get from other matches. And, obviously all these companies, when they look at their budgets each year, there's limitations, and they need to see what, is the most return on investment that they're going to get. And I go through the same thing every year when I find out the match is going to happen. I freak out. But every year it always comes through and it exceeds the years before. To be in a position where you have sponsors reaching out to you saying, hey, can I support the match? Like, it doesn't get much better than that. And we know that the sponsors that do support this, or feel confident that they're doing it for the right reasons. And we try to do as much as we can. Like, the guys have been amazing with some of these thank you notes they've written. It could be like the next ad campaign for some of these companies. But yeah, the support from, the tactical shooting community, always amazing. Then you have individuals who just will call up and say, hey, I've got this buddy at this company. Do you need this? even like you're talking to one sponsor and they're like, oh, here, I know a guy at this company. Like there's just this desire to help out in any way possible. Logistically, like Matt helped with carrying some of the load down there. And I remember, when he's getting ready to pull away, I'm like, all right, you've got the entire prize table in your car, no pressure.
I'm like, oh shit.
Drive careful. But just, yeah, people, want to be part of a good thing. And then, we have individuals who step forward and pay for shirts. No benefit, besides a small tax write-off, like their name's not affiliated with the match in any way. They're not associated with a company that's going to get recognition. We obviously lunch was supported. As far as on my side, those are the most obvious things, but so many people offer to volunteer. It's almost to the point where we have to turn people away, who want to help out because it's just so many moving parts. But yeah.
And JK, what about from your end as the match director?
So I would say some of the relationships are like from the Army side, you really just have to be willing to like push the agenda really. And I was fortunate enough to be in a position, I was HHC first sergeant for a while, and then I went up to the group S3 and I was in SUSC up there, the ops sergeant. And so, I was tied in, I would see the group CSM on a daily basis, and everyone that kind of needed, to put some ass behind it to get it sold up to higher, was there. And luckily, like the group commander too, he used to be my battalion commander. I knew him really well. So those relationships were in key in just getting it sold up to higher. And as always, make sure the match actually happens, because then there's, the ammo factor. It's like fortunate if I was right there with the, the land and ammo guys in the group S3 and operations center to be like, hey, do we have this ammo? Can we get it? And then, I had a lot of relationships I had leverage, personally on my end. And I think those were important. Maybe they're not as important, when it was happening regularly, but after being a 4-year break and a lot of people that were familiar with the match were now either gone or moved on in their careers, those were on the Army side very important, for me to have, because, one, I educated them on what it was and how to navigate it, but then two, it, was instrumental in getting the match to even happen regardless. I'd say the relationships, on kind of the civilian side, obviously Donna, 100%. That relationship was vital, and she walked me through a lot of stuff and helped me out. But then like the guys over at Zoo City Armory, Snappy, Chris Brower, Jason Byerly, and those guys, phenomenal. And I learned so much from Jason as far as like being a match director and him coming out there, and like he was out there a lot of days. I mean, he's got his own matches he's building, his monthly matches, he's got a range to run, but he was out there a lot. I could call him any hour of the day and be like, hey man, I was thinking about this, what are your thoughts? So those were really, really important. And just really the 3-gun community and all, like the outpour. I mean, I had guys like, hey, I freaking, I want RO. How do you need help? Nope, you don't need ours. Well, do you need help me to come out there and build? Like just everyone, the outgrowing support. But I would say, really just everybody was important, man, in the success of that match. Everyone had a hand in it to some point. And if they didn't, they offered it, and we just didn't need it. That's just that whole grassroots thing and what makes it so special to everyone. Everyone's got a reason why it touches their heart. But they all just helped out it, exponentially. Yeah, I was kind of went on a rant there. My bad.
No, I mean, I had my neighbor across the street. He was building the stands that the flags went in at each stage. I had like half the neighborhood helping me stuff prize bags, shooter bags, 0 hour, because for some crazy reason I thought I was gonna be able to do it on my own. And then like 2 days before, I'm like, this isn't gonna happen. So like even up in Ashburn, Virginia, this was a community effort. So yeah, it's just,
yeah, I mean, and just to give you an idea of like, so I live on a horse farm, rent an apartment from the owners out here, and I do some work on the farm for them. And they're like in their late 60s, early 70s, and even they came out to the match. I told them what it was about, the history of it, and they even asked me, they're like, "Hey, how can we help?" And I was like, Catherine, is really, there's nothing I really need. I was like, except if I get behind on my chores on the farm, don't yell at me. And they actually, and I thought it was just like one of those pleasantries, well, hey, let us know when the match is, we'll come out. And they actually called me the day that it kicked off and was like, "Hey, we're on our way. Where should we go?" And then I was like, "Oh wow!" They came out there and sat like half the day.
Wow.
You know, just yeah. And I mean, it's really, you can't. I mean, there's a lot of people that had a hand in it, like I said, like Zoo City. You know, like John Sherbert out there at Griffin Group. You know, but really, it's just everyone, you know, wants to just make sure it becomes a success. And everybody, and I was, like I told you before, man, I know what I know. I know what I don't know. I'm very open, you know, like I said, when I was going through tough times, like I'm open about that stuff now. And, you know, I know what I don't know. And so like, you know, I even told guys, I was like, I'm a little, like, I feel like I'm a little over my head. Like, you know, I really hope I'm able to pull this off. And they were like, well, dude, you've got full support from everybody. And like,
Mhm.
I mean, it was anyone and everyone that I know I've shot 3-gun with. They're like, we're not going to, you know, if you're hurting somewhere, like we'll help you. Like, but we're not gonna let this fail. So I would say it was just, and that goes back to the grassroots thing. It's just everyone, you know, wants to get behind it and help it be successful.
So to kind of follow up with the previous questions, can you tell the listeners about your strategy with the stage design? I know we kind of touched on it, but what was your strategy? What did you want to, what was the purpose behind what you did there?
So, like I said before, the t-shirts were obviously a very intimidating part behind the match. But after being 4 years of it being gone, it was like, you know, the Duskin just has a certain, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a flavor to it, like a certain feel. You know, it's not like the tactical games where it's a lot of like physical stuff, but it's still a physical match. You know, you shoot all 6 stages in one day, obviously being in the summertime, that's like one thing, but then there's also that physical aspect. You know, obviously jacking steel, that stage is always going to be more physical than the rest, but there was always something involved in it that, you know, brought in a fitness aspect to it. That's, like I said, I was kind of paying that homage to Mike, you know, memorializing him, but also what he wanted was to get guys into competitive shooting because he thought it made them better at their jobs. And, you know, because it's healthy. You know, I was talking to Nate, and Nate was like, man, my dad would just make anything competitive, like making a cup of coffee, you know, taking the trash out, it didn't matter. And, you know, he would tell me, like, he would sit on range 65 and watch Eric and Mike, you know, or his dad just go back and forth trying to shave off seconds. And so, you know, in the stage designs, you know, for one, I was like, I don't want to regurgitate everything that I've, you know, in the past 2 years that I've shot it, because I wanted it to be its own match, you know, for that year. You know, and I went back and forth. I was like, man, maybe I should do it like and there was even like for the t-shirt, we even kind of thought about, like, hey, maybe we should just like do a t-shirt that kind of pays respect to all the years past and put all the, you know, the animals, you know, that he's been punching all together at once. And like, it went from like playing in a band, you know, to where I was like, man, maybe you should be punching all of them, have one of his foot on one of their throats. But, you know, it was, so the stage designs, you know, it was like, there was a little bit of something that I saw in those 2 years that I shot, but then I wanted it to be its own at the same time too. So I looked at, you know, how can I pay respect to like something that happened, you know, and that was the dump truck. So like, that was the reason why, like in stage 1, you started in the back of that box truck, you know, it's not a dump truck, but, you know, flicked it open with an AK and burned down the target. So with some of the stage designs, it was like, I want to pay respects, you know, to Mike. And, you know, with that one, you know, kind of throw something in there that was, you know, a part of what he's done, you know, in his legacy, his career. And then also, you know, bring that physical aspect to it. So, and then, you know, in every stage, I tried to put something that was in there. And then, you know, there was also relative to like the military community. So, you know, obviously with the shoot house, you know, stage 1, that was kind of paying respects to Mike. You know, stage 2, you kind of had the tire drag, but it was one of those things where like sprinted through the house, so your heart rate was up, and then you got to like drag the tire. But jacking steel, I mean, obviously that's just all Mike. He was a big dude, loved to lift heavy things. I love it, totally get behind it. So that's, you know, where that one came into. It was just like, all right, and shooting is important, but let's test your physical ability too. And then with the stage designs too, and I wanted to make sure it tested someone where it was all around. So like if you were a really good shooter, like, you know, a professional civilian shooter, it's like, all right, well, we're going to bring you out of your comfort level here and also make you physically work too. So how is that going to affect you? And then designing the stages, it was like, okay, you're all SF guys, military guys, you're in great shape, but now let's test your shooting ability and more of the competitive realm, and pull you out of that comfort zone that you have, expose you to a different type of shooting, which with military guys, a lot of it's the shotgun. Let's be like, we shoot rifle and pistol, but like the type of shotgun that you're shooting 3 guns, not the same as, sawed off shotgun you're sticking up to a door handle blowing off. So, I tried to design the stages in that way. And then just give it its own feel at the same time too, and not give stuff we've seen in the past. Now there was like the jacking steel, one of the things I loved the most. If anybody knows me, I love bench pressing. So when there was that one year where you had to bench press the 70-pound dumbbells, so I put that in there. But then the rest of the stage was, obviously something a lot different that you didn't see in the years past. So I would say that was like the strategy with it, man, was just trying to give its own feel, still kind of, pay homage or, respects to the stages in the past, but then give it its own thing, and then kind of make it where it was testing every skill level of shooter, but in a way that, exposed one side that was probably weak in them, and then where they were strong at, they'd still be able to excel. If that makes sense.
What was the story behind the stage where they had to like cut open the zip tie?
So with that one, it was called Meeting Going Bad, or not, or no, that one was not Meeting Going Bad, but there was one like that in the past. And I think it was the 2016 match, where you basically start off, your hands were flat on the table. With this one, it was kind of like I said, paying respects to the past match, but making this stage still like its own, for this year, and not regurgitating something. So it was, just testing that, ability, like, to break free, shooting offhand, with one hand, even though you're strong, and just kind of giving its own feel, but still kind of bringing back something that's happened in the past. Because one of the things I looked at and I started to really understand, and it was kind of sad, but then it was kind of exciting, was like, there's a whole new like generation of Green Berets in third group now. When I started really getting into this and talking to guys, they're like, "What's the Duskin?" Or they're like, "Yeah, we've heard about it, but I was never shot it before." And I was like, "Man," and it made me feel kind of old, because I was like, "Oh wow," a lot of us now that shot it in 2018 have moved on, if not gotten out, or now in like staff jobs. So it was like one of those things, like, like I said, stuff that I saw that I really liked in the matches, but then trying to, bring it in and make it its own, but still pay respects to what happened in the past. And so the guys, as they hear the stories from the past matches, they got to kind of experience it, but in its own way and style for 2022.
One of the most
and honestly,
exciting...
I don't know. And just kind of going back to it, like the match success, like, some of all these weren't my own ideas. Like some guys like, "Oh man, like, remember that one match?" And so some of these ideas I won't take off for myself. Like even the guy that was Jay Schaff, he gave me a similar scenario for that stage, but not the same exact one. And he even told me, he's like, "Man, I wasn't even thinking about that when I was, describing it to you." So it was one of those things, like, I don't take all the credit for stage designs, even though I'm the match director, but I was receptive to input, and then kind of used that and then just made it my own for the actual thing. But go ahead, Donna. Sorry.
Oh, and just what you were saying about the next generation, I think one of the coolest things from this year was you guys said that there was a group of guys out there who are, fresh, like brand new to the group. And there's always been this fear that as the years go on, they're going to know about Mike and the match. And so it was super cool. This year we had these brand new guys. One, this is their intro to the community. Like, holy crap. And now you've got this generation who can carry on that. And, it's cool to have a lot of those mission-based stages, because it's also like a storytelling, of that your group, of these things that these guys in the past have done, these legends in the community. And so I think, for civilians, the mission-based stage is super cool. You get to kind of play special forces for a day. And, for the military guys, it's like, an homage type thing. And I think it also shows too how you can apply, like how applicable competitive shooting is. That's why we always encourage teams to come out and compete together, because that is so important. Like the benefits of that, it's awesome to compete as a team in these type of scenarios. So I think that was something, you know, I was super excited to hear about this year, especially these new guys getting to experience it.
You know, something I'd like to add in there is, for a long time now, I've been saying when tradition gets in the way of innovation and advancement, you're going to cripple and kill the people that you're serving under. And a lot of military organizations are built up on tradition, and there's certain people within the military that focus solely on the tradition, and it's quite frustrating. But something like this, where you're bridging tradition, innovation, and lethality all into one, this is the type of tradition that we need to impart in the military, because you're teaching them how to kill the enemy, and you're making them better. You're training them mentally, and you're teaching them how to become focused. One of the things I got into shooting 3-gun for is the mental preparation, and I look at it almost as like a planning process. You know, whenever I'm planning a raid or an attack, you know, it's very methodical and it's very structured. When I'm planning a stage, it's very methodical and it's very structured. And so I want to get as perfect as I can be and understand that plan to where I can execute it on demand every time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that, Matt. And it's like you were talking about methodically planning. You know, there's obviously, I mean, there's probably some operations I've done, you know, I could say the same thing, but I could probably sit here and tell you exactly my plan for the last match I shot in April, which was, you know, Zoo City's Battle of the South, with the whole mental preparation piece. And that's what I tell guys too. Like, there's so many aspects to it. Like, that's one of the things I love too, is just the mental part to it. You know, coming up with your stage plan and then knowing it to the T to where you can regurgitate it, you know, 2 months later.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the biggest things too, that like I would tell a lot of guys too getting into the sport. And then just with like the application of shooting, like there's stuff that like I've experienced and, you know, learned since I've been shooting, you know, 3-gun. I'm like, man, when I was a team guy, I really wish, you know, I would like learn this stuff, and, you know, because I could have applied it, you know, into what I was doing, you know, there when it came to like shooting and stuff like that. So agree with you wholeheartedly on that one.
So when putting together these stages, did you have like a certain skill set of shooter in mind? I know you had some professionals show up, and you also have some guys who are completely new to 3-gun. And were you trying to find like a happy medium? Because if you made it too skill heavy, I guess that could be rather discouraging for some new guys. And then if you made it too new shooter friendly, then it wouldn't really be interesting for some of those professional shooters.
Yeah. So one of the things I learned, and, you know, Jason Byerly, can't say enough good things about, you know, him, good friends beforehand. But like one of the things I learned the most about like stage design is time. Like, I mean, obviously you only have so much, you know, daylight. So you have to look at like, okay, how long is it going to take from the time a shooter goes up, you know, shoots the stage to you reset and your next shooter gets up. So that's one of the things you got to factor in. But then also, you don't want to make it too watered down where it's so simple that it really doesn't do anything. So really what I looked at was like, and I kind of alluded to this, you know, earlier in the stage designs, was making it to where it involved something all around, you know, the skill level, you know, where it wasn't too easy, not too hard, but kind of middle of the road. But then also there was the physical aspect that made it difficult as well. So if you're a really good shooter, you know, you're a professional shooter, you know, I would say some of the stages you would be able to burn through them, but the physical aspect is what brought in, you know, a whole new aspect to it that made it difficult for them. Whereas now you got some, you know, military shooters to where like the physical aspect was easy to them, but, you know, it's like the, you know, shooting a double Texas Star, you know, is like completely different, you know, from what they're used to. Because I mean, obviously when you go into houses and stuff, your target's not spinning around very fast on you.
Does it have 8 arms?
Yeah, and it has 8 arms. Yeah, unless it's like squid and an alien. But that was one of the things, you know, it was just making it where it was appealing to everyone, but not so lopsided. Because like the biggest thing that I was worried about was it's, at the end of the day, it's about the new bringing new shooters in. So what I didn't want is for the match for a guy to come in there. I wanted, it's humbling. It was humbling for me. I learned a lot when I first shot it. I timed out on 2 or 3 of the stages, but I had fun and I enjoyed it. It made me want to continue to do it more and get better. So that's that was one of the biggest things, was like, I knew I was getting a lot of new Army, shooters in there, new guys. I wanted to make it to where I would say, like, I wanted to make it where it was challenging, but it was to the point where it made them be like, you know what? Yeah, I kind of sucked. I didn't do as well as I think I could if I practiced, but I want to get better and I want to get into it. So I didn't want to, that's kind of the level I wanted to bring it at. And then I tried to, I've been shooting really serious in 3 guns since 2020. Like I said, I shot 2 matches a year from 17 to 19. And then in 2020, I shot, I think, 23 to 30 matches. And then almost the same thing with last year. This year, I kind of took a big break just to run the Duskin. But now I'm going to get back into it. But what I try to do is everything that I've seen a little bit of, I tried to implement in there. Because some guys are like, man, you're putting a rifle spinner in there? Like, that's going to eat some dudes' lunches. And I was like, yeah, but it's fun. And then, like, they're like, yeah, but they're going to time out. And I was like, yeah, but if I know, the mentality of some of these guys, you're going to be like, all right, I need to get better at that. I want to do that. And I actually had guys come in, they were like, hey, what's the secret to that thing?
Timing.
Yeah, timing. The double shotgun spinner. Some people were like, "You're really gonna put that in there?" Like, but what I wanted to do was expose all these guys to stuff that I've seen that I think is really cool. So that way, and that was some of the stuff that you haven't seen in the Duskins in the past, like a rifle spinner. You haven't seen, the double shotgun spinner. So that was one of the things I tried to just implement in there and kind of, the stuff the pros would appreciate because they've seen it. It's, it's even challenging for them. But then, it wasn't too hard or, and then it was like the newer shooters, it wasn't so easy that they just could just breeze through it too. That's just, I just had to play with it really. And like I said, I built the stages. I had signs. And then once I started putting them on the ground, that's where I was like, okay, this is, gotta water this down or pull this back a little bit. So like, and I think you asked me this earlier, so you want to elaborate on it, Matt, was the jacking steel stage.
Mm-hmm.
So initially and just for like the listeners that didn't get to go there. So the jacking steel stage, you start off with 70-pound dumbbells. You had to bench press them 5 times, drop them. Slap cup's always been one of my favorite things in the sport. I've only done it a handful of times, since I've been shooting the past couple of years. But it's where there's 3 cups and there's a round under the cup. You don't know which one has it, and you knock it over. And whatever round is there is where you run to. So like there's 3 different bays, 1 shotgun, rifle, pistol. So if you knock over the pistol round, then you got to run there. Well, you had to pick up on this stage 45-pound kettlebells and run with them to that station. And then, you had to do that to every one you went to. Well, with that, initially, the cups where they were sitting at the bench and everything was only about maybe 10 to 15 yards from all the bays where you would shoot the guns. Initially, it was about 30 yards. If no one really knows me, I'm kind of a juggernaut. I'm not known for my my intellect, so to speak. I always revert to my physical abilities, but I was just like, I just wanted to make it hard. I really did. I was like, yeah, it's gonna crush people. And then the weights. So like on the shotgun, you had to. Initially, it was like I think 125 pounds or 135 pounds that you had to pull, and then the chain on it. So the chain on this thing, I use this logging chain. Each segment weighs about 50 pounds, and I had 3 segments hooked together. So what I ended up doing there, they were like, dude, you got to make that lighter. Like, and it really came down to a time factor. Because like people can do it, but you're going to have a stage that takes a dude, 2 minutes to shoot. And that's like a top level shooter. So now think about your lower level shooter. So in stage designs, you have to figure out, okay, this is, your top level shooter is going to be able to shoot it in this, your mid level shoot it here. And then what you want to do is factor in like, okay, the top amount of time I want to allow for it is probably my bottom level shooter. So then really what you want to do is like, let's say a stage, you make the time out 180 seconds. It doesn't take a top level shooter 180 seconds to do it. That 180 seconds is where you're like, okay, my bottom level shooter, I want them to be able to complete the stage, but I can't let them go any further past this point because now I have to be able to reset, get my next shooter in there to allow us to be able to shoot this match in 9 to 10 hours. And, and part of that is allowing for about, I allow for about 3 hours of contingency time for, the weather, range control shuts us down, for whatever reason, you never know. So yeah, that was kind of that stage. So I took that sled down from 135 pounds and I made it, 45-pound sled, but then you had that 110-pound worth of chain you had to drag. So that kind of made it a nightmare. And then actually Ben Blanton, the assistant match director, he argued with me for a while, like, hey man, take a segment out, shorten it up, drop the weight. And I was like, I'll drop the weight, I'll shorten up the distance for the run. But I was like, that chain stays where it's at. And it did. I was like, I'm not budgeting. So yeah, that was you gotta find that balance of time and difficulty, and then just kind of make sure it's fun for everyone. Yeah.
Hey, Frank, we're going to go ahead and skip the next question if you want to just continue with your question.
Easy. Okay, so when you're running an event and you guys obviously put a lot of time and energy into this, you guys probably bounce some scenarios off each other. So what are some like contingencies that you plan for? Things not going necessarily the way that you wanted them to? And did any of them occur? Did you have to put any of those contingencies into effect? And do you consider them any of them vital to like future iterations of the Duskin? And start with you, Donna.
Not so many on my side. I'm not so good at leaving things to chance. And it's hard, especially being remote and not being able to see the lay of the land. I mean, it was easier when we were doing the match consecutive years, but I'm trying to remember, okay, what did we do in 2018? What did the range look like? I find out on the trailer that we used to do registration in that I'm counting on for my only source of AC is no more. That was a struggle. And
I got the AC fixed in that for you for next year. It actually works now.
Of course it does. Thanks. Thanks. But it was like those kind of things, figuring out, we've always made do. I mean, there was the one year that a little river formed in the middle of the range and like boxes of ammo are floating down the river. But it's just making sure, okay, where we're going to do registration, we're going to do prize table. Rain always is a thing. Where's lunch going to go? All those little details. And I mean, even things, we're trying to get into the nitty gritty of like making sure you have enough toilet paper, making sure, I think at one point we had to get some more spray paint. There's just little things you can't even, it's impossible to anticipate everything, especially when there's been 4 years in between. You're trying to remember, okay, what worked, what didn't work that long ago. I had a baby since then, so my brain's already like complete mush. Luckily I keep decent records, but we look a lot and we keep records a lot, so you can go back and learn those historical lessons. But no matter what, you have to be prepared, and that's what being a part of this has taught me, like to fly by the seat of your pants and like make things work. Jerry rig, prize table setups or whatever has to be done. So those were really, I mean, logistically, as far as lunch, shirts, prize table, those were where we were going to host things, rain, things like that, were most of the contingencies that, on my end. I know JK had some more than that, but I also, one thing was when I realized that I had no room in the car and had to get a U-Haul. And then that day I was going to leave, found out there were no U-Hauls within 100 miles. So, it's always something that comes up. That's the fun of it. Ish.
Let's hear your side, JK.
Yeah. Oh man. So being a match director for this match, one of the pains, and I shouldn't say it's a pain, but it is a pain, is you're relying a lot on the Army to provide everything, or, the military. And there's just so many factors. I mean, like transportation, because privately owned vehicles aren't allowed on the range. So we had to provide all transportation. We used range 65 and probably about 200 yards down, the road, range 62 Alpha. There was another stage over there. So we had to provide transportation back and forth to those ranges. And just everything, like the tents for where the food was at. There's just so much stuff. So, and even the contingencies I had, like for instance, like vehicles, I was like, okay, I'm going to need no less than like 8 vehicles, vans, and I need at least like 4 trucks. I was like, all right, well, you know what? I'll just RFS 6 trucks and 12 vans. And, so I was incorporating an error of like 2 to 3, per. I got like 4 vans and I got 2 trucks. So then, like I'm scrambling, but even then, like I said before, it's one of the things, you make things happen. So I knew, I reached out to like the HHC first sergeant, and I was like, hey man, I know we got 2 trucks over there. Can I use them? So, I made stuff like that happen. Yeah. One of the biggest things, I'd say one of the biggest things that makes you worry is, at any other match, you're the match director. So like you control the things that happen. Like, if a range needs to shut down, you're like, hey, shut that stage down so this one go out. Well, on a military installation, you're beholden to range control. So, there's some variables that just could happen where they could put you in a check fire for who knows long, how long, for whatever reason. Then there's the weather. Obviously, if it's raining, high winds, hey, we're shooting, but a second lightning comes in, so part of stage designing and looking at time was like, okay, I factored in like 9 hours. That's what I'll, we'll start at 8, we'll be finished by 5. And then the way I looked at it was like, 5 or 6 was like, that gives us about 3 hours of play time in case, weather hits, range control. And then I was like, all right, well, if all else fails, and, we would use Sunday as a makeup day, if we had to. And so none of those occurred, as far as that goes. And really, I would say there was, like, honestly, like once the match happened, like I thought like the 2 days of the match would be probably some of the most stressful days. And it actually wasn't. It was the most relaxing and fun because I just got to walk around, and I just got to watch, guys have a good time. And then like good friends of mine, like laughing, carrying on. And luckily, none of those big contingencies like range control shutting us down, weather and all that happened. Because the weather did look kind of bad for a while. Like I was telling Donna, I was like, it does not look good. Like we got thunder and lightning storms on the forecast for those 2 days. So that was kind of like designing the stages too. It was like, okay, give us 3 hours, play with that. And then Sunday, that didn't happen. The vehicle thing, I kind of already touched on that. That did happen, but, figured it out. And that kind of goes back to what we said before, what makes a success. And I think everybody wanting it to happen, like tent stakes. I reached out to our support battalion and they gave me these giant wooden stakes. And for those of you who've never been out to range 65, it's very hard packed, like almost like concrete out there, and no wood stake is going into that stuff. And, so like they couldn't find any spot. I just reached out, a lot of my buddies are like, CSMs or sergeant majors, and like, hey, 10 stakes. And then they were able to cough them up for me in a few hours. And so it's one of the things, I mean, the biggest contingencies I'd say was weather and range control. And luckily they didn't happen.
So I got to ask, what are some of the key takeaways and lessons learned for next year? Donna?
That is a good question, Matt. There's certain things that are always going to be constraints, like because of the level of approval involved, we're never going to get that official blessing till late in the game. But there's things we can do. It's now that I know, JK is like on board, because I don't know if someone's, as much as I could be ready and do the match and all that, if there's no match director, there's no match. So at least knowing that someone's willing and able to do it next year, like I can start, reaching out to people ahead of time, because a lot of the thing, some of these bigger companies do their budgets the year prior. So by the time you're reaching out to them, it's as much as they want to, they just can't. Although, we've been fortunate enough that I can't even, each year, I can't even imagine improving on the prize table, but somehow we do. So any extra time you can get is great, because when you have extra time budgeted in, that's when you have time to think of these little things, like the small details that could happen. And a lot of times small details will turn into big issues. Man, lessons learned. I don't know. It's one of those things where between myself and JK, we're having to do the work of like what several committees would be doing. And that's not complaining, because it's almost the way it has to be with this match, to keep, this close control, to keep it's so important and so meaningful to so many people that it's really precious. And it's not something you're willing to trust too many people, but time management's always a thing. A lot of the uphill battles are overcome just by having, for me, the same match director 2 years in a row. Like, that makes things so much easier. But yeah, from my end, there was lesson learned as far as budget things and just logistically, like making sure sponsors for things that, without having to put too much money up front of our own pockets and things like that. But yeah, I might have to get back to y'all on that question, but I'm still, I think, coming off of the match, and I don't know if I've had a chance to really sit back, and there's of course things we can do better, but it's always a learning process. There's always going to be something that comes up, and it's,
JK?
Oh man, I have so many lessons learned from like the Army side. And it's kind of like Don was saying, like, it's one of those precious things. A lot of people try to have input on this batch, like from the chain of command. I don't want to say chain of command. Just everybody, you're just like, and that's why it takes a special person to be a match director, is because like you have to be willing to tell people no, like, because good idea fairies just run rampant, and you're like, no, you're not doing that. And sometimes I'm sitting here and I'm like, if you might ask me, I really don't care, but like, I'm telling like a colonel or like, command sergeant major, I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Well, I think it'd be really good. Like, that's not what we're doing. Like, so like, you had to have someone taking charge. But I would say the lessons learned on the Army side, like, so with that being said, I looked forward, I was like, okay, I need X amount of people. So I ended up getting like a 38, person detail to help with this. And like, some of it was drawing ammo, drivers for the vehicles, individuals to help reset the stages, because that was one of the biggest things I knew it was going to push the pace, and like, have it on there. So, like, oh yeah, it's too easy to like, task org, people and align them somewhere. Well, trying to wrangle in 38, anywhere from privates to, E5s was like really a pain with everything else I had to deal with. So like in hindsight, like Army side, I wish I would have, put an action officer for each unit that those people came from. So then I only had like 4 people to deal with as opposed to 38. Because getting different texts of I'm going to be late because of this or that, and hey, I'm swapping out with this person, it would just been a lot better to have one, a couple touch points instead of 38 touch points. There was that piece. And then really, I think that was the biggest lessons learned, like on just the Army side. And then obviously looking at like building some of those contingencies. So last minute, I'm not looking for tent stakes, looking at like vehicles. Like I've already got a plan for next year for the vehicle thing, from what I've seen from this year, and a few other things. I would say from a match director, what I learned, there was just so many things I could have done that would have made my life easier. Like the stage boxes for the ROs, sitting there the night before the match, putting that together. And like me and my girlfriend left out there from like, I think it was like 11:30, and then by the time I got home, went to bed, like it was like 1 a.m, and then I was back up at 3:30, 4 o'clock, headed back out there again. But just looking at a lot of that stuff that I could have those stage boxes done months back. I was a pro timer, some staplers, some this and that, some radios, and chargers, and stuff like that. So really looking forward on that. Like there was like, just little intricate pieces of it, like the stage numbers for the, signs, going ahead and have those put on there. Obviously stage briefs, because I proofed the stages the day before the staff shoot. So obviously I had to like kind of print those up, I don't want to say last minute, but you have to proof the stages, adjust the stage before you can really type that up and stick to it, because then you're just doing double the work. Yeah, I think it's those little nuances that add those little fine details to the match. Like, I'll be honest with you. One of the things I dropped the ball on was like the stage names. And I even told Donna, this was like after, I was like, you know what? I realized I never put the stage names on any of the stages. Like it was on like the paper, but it was never posted up, so like you never came up and was like, oh, this is Jacking Steel. This is, this is Breaking Free. This is, or Breached Away. This is Surprise Cock Bags. So those little pieces like that. And then there was like backup score sheets, like the Jason, Byerly hit me up. He's like, hey, you got the backup score sheets? And I was like, I could have done those so far back. So it's just little things like that make my life easier as the match director. So I'm not running around like a chicken with my head cut off and getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep, the day prior. So yeah, a lot of good takeaways from that. Just leaning forward. I was proactive throughout all this, but it was a large learning curve. So obviously I looked at some of those things where it's like, okay, I can do this, streamline it, make it more efficient.
So as much as we want to look like pros, it's so much trial and error. Like the shirts the first year, we just kind of guessed on the number and, had some left over. So this year we're like, okay, we'll get people to submit their size ahead of time and pre-do it. And we still like, it doesn't, end up. So it's just each year, like it's always trial and error and figuring out constantly what you need to do better or different while still making it look like it went perfectly.
Well, you guys, from a competitor perspective, it looked pretty flawless.
Yeah.
Super easy. No problem.
So
schedule would have said different.
So I have to ask this. I know we already kind of talked about what makes this match so special, but I have to ask, what sets this match apart from all the other type of military memorial matches?
So very, much like we said before, the exclusivity of it, being invite only, which isn't like some, cool kids club that, it's just that we have these restraints and, obviously the priority, this is for third group. We're trying to honor, the group Mike came from. So there's that aspect, the fact obviously that it's on post. And we've had so many people say like, oh, of course, if we were able to do this somewhere else, we've had a lot, people offer like, oh, I've got land, I got this. We could do a lot more. We could, there's no doubt about that. But this match is in every way is such a balancing act, to find that sweet spot between like JK said, like stage is too easy, stage is too difficult, finding that perfect spot. And, we are both well aware that you will never please everyone, but to keep the match what it was always intended to be, requires, we don't want to get too big. We want to grow. We want to be able to reach more people, but we also don't want to get too big. And so there's always, we talked about like, you want to find ways to make it easier next year. Like, oh, maybe we do a website. We want to stay grassroots. So you kind of have to sacrifice, like, yes, this could make our life easier, but there's the risk of getting away from, what we intend to do. So, the grassroots, like I said, we keep using, that word, but there's no better way to describe it. This community effort. It's very much a family vibe, a family effort. And again, just the mission of the match in itself. To my knowledge, I don't know of any other matches with the goal, some are to have fun, to challenge, to memorialize, but to carry on this legacy of Mike and to continue to get people involved in shooting, in three gun specifically, but the shooting sports in general, is the specific mission that we try to keep at the core while memorializing. But it's just, I don't know, there's a vibe there, and to be fair, I've shot a lot of matches, but not nearly as many as, the three of you. So at least from my perspective, that's, what makes it so different.
JK?
Man, so I could go on forever like this, but I'll keep it, to as clear and concise as I can. So above all else, one of the things, and it hit me the really, really, it made me feel good, but time back to like the emotional part of it was at the very end, staff shoot day, Nate, Mike's son, he shot that day. And really emotional moment because he looked at me and he was like, "Hey man, like great job. I don't, my dad wouldn't have wanted it to come back any other way." And I talked a lot with Nate, after that, when he was coming out, and I kind of said something about it earlier, when he would tell me, he's like, "Man, there's a lot of fond memories out here, of watching my dad and Eric just sit here and go back and forth, talking shit to each other, trying to shave off a half second here. Oh, I beat you, by hundredths of a second here, and then just doing the same drills over and over, just trying to get better, but also having fun." So I think that's one of the aspects that makes it so special, is like, it's a memorial match, but it's like, it's special to like Mike and his family, because that's where Mike spent a lot of time, was out there at range 65, and Nate and like his family have memories out there, and that's where this match is happening. And that's one of the reasons why it can't happen anywhere else. Because that's, might say, "Oh, well, you could do it at range 37. Imagine all this." Yeah, and you could make it awesome, but like, when you have Nate, sitting here telling you about these memories that he had here, like, it brought a whole new meaning to the match to me, like getting to hear him, say stuff like that. But I think that's one of the things that makes it special, because it's memorializing, Mike and, others like Tongue that have given it, but it's also like, it's a very meaningful spot that was to that person you're memorializing. And you're trying to keep that memory there. So I think that's one of the things that hands down makes it, stand out from any other memorial match that's out there, because how do you replicate that? You can't. And then I think the other thing too is, it's exclusivity of the match that makes it special, because a lot of civilians in the community hear about it, but they don't really know how to get into it or how to get invited. But it's special because, it's meant for, it truly memorializes what Mike wanted. And he wanted to expose, guys to competitive shooting and get them into the sport. He wanted to compete because he thought it was good to, compete, and it made you better, but also because, it made you better at your job, and it made you more, increased lethality, and strove you to be better and have that mentality of like, hey, I'm not the best, but I can be the best, or I can be better, I can improve. So I think that's one of the things, man, just in the essence of like who it was, that it's memorialized, which is Mike, where he worked at, and the meaning it has behind the family. I don't think you really put that together at any other memorial match and get that.
I'd agree. Like whenever you mentioned Nate spending a lot of his time there, I can see how special that is. A special moment is at the end of when you were doing the ceremony, JK, and you brought Maggie up in front of everybody, and you talked about how this was her birthday, and it was like a whirlwind effect of like when you were announcing it to her, saying, "Hey, these are the dates." And that's really what it makes it so special, from an outside perspective, because there is so much emotion caught up into everything. You're bringing a community of people to her, and you're keeping a memory alive.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing too, man, is And I think that's what makes it so special to some of the civilians that come there and shoot, because they're getting exposed to like this very tight knit community, and they're learning about who this guy is, Mike. And then, like I said, there's a whole other breed, a generation of Green Berets, they're also learning about, who Mike was and what he stood for and what he wanted. So it's just that, there's just so many factors that go into it, man. Is what I think sets it apart.
Yeah, it's like teaching you're introducing them to a culture, and you're introducing them to a set of values that they haven't been exposed to. Everybody.
100%.
So as my final question, and I'm going to add my own shout out to this at the end after you two, but are there any shout outs you two would like to give to anybody who's important to this?
For me, there's a lot of people who, well, the Duskin family for one, sometimes it's weird, talking about Mike and taking this role, not having ever met him, me not having ever served. It feels kind of presumptuous, I guess, in a way. So the fact that, I've been entrusted to play the role that I do is just something I'm so thankful for. But the Duskin family for just letting me into their life and represent. I mean, it's like no pressure. I'm becoming a on behalf of their dad and their husband, and so that's a pretty crazy thing. And the big challenge this year was that the gap between 2018 and 2022. So what always happens once I get the go ahead, start calling sponsors every day, in between my full-time job, just getting on the phone, and half the time was spent, oh, don't work there anymore. It's been like everyone had left, there's new contacts. And so I got a lot of help from, there's too many people to even name. Like there were so many people who have since left the industry, but were like, oh, no problem. Let me look through my Rolodex, see who I've got. People from all over, Lunchbox, one of the first people I met out in North Carolina, making calls. God, there's so many individuals that were just maybe couldn't even shoot the match. It's not like they had any skin in the game, and we're just, oh, I've got a buddy who knows this guy, who might want to support. So yeah, my neighbors, obviously, who I had I had like a little sweatshop going on down the street, and I was saying how my son owes a big thank you for kind of being without a mom for a couple months. Hopefully he doesn't hold that against me one day, because this year Will was deployed the whole time, so that was interesting. But yeah, obviously JK for being my other half through all this. I think it was a good balance, because as crazy he is about detail, I am and I can go overboard and get too caught up in little details that don't matter. And I think, I hope for him, like some of the details I did bring up were relevant and important. So obviously sponsors is my big thing. Thank yous to them who pretty much, I had to make the phone calls, but they make it easy with their willingness to support. And to add to that, I am hoping in the next couple weeks we have some, thank yous to still mail out to everyone. So that is still in the works. But yeah, Matt, obviously, you're the role you played. Everyone kind of played a small part, which is so awesome. And yeah.
JK?
It's long, the Duskin family, first and foremost. I talked to Maggie quite a bit, just kind of let me in and, get to know her and just so that. Same thing with Nate. Jake didn't make it out, but like Nate, it was really cool. Like us, talked about the conversations we had, but like, Nate even pulled me aside and he was like, "Hey, check this out." And so I didn't know this. He shoots with his dad's gun that he competed with, and actually was, the pistol Mike was carrying whenever he passed. And Nate actually used it then. So I got to know them a lot. So I just want to give them a huge shout out because they're really a great family. Donna, 100%. Can't leave her out. She's right up there. She was with me from the beginning of this, and I would have probably had no hair at this point without her. I would have pulled it all out, or it would have fell out. Zoo City Armory, those guys over there, it's like phenomenal, man. I mean, I could ask them for anything and they would have get up. Like Snappy did all the trophies, for the match for the most part. Don and I kind of had like our one-offs that we did ourselves, but he handled all the trophies for the competitors. Jason was out there, like I said, countless hours. And like I said, like I took ownership of doing the stage designs, but man, he came out there and just mentored me. Honestly, I loved it because he let me have enough. He was sitting and let me fall on the face because I'm one of those guys. I learn from making mistakes. Like you can tell me something all you want, but like I need to like get my hands on it. I gain it off of experience, which I mean I'm pretty sure everybody does. But like you can tell me something, but I guess it's like when we're kids, like we don't listen to our parents, and then they're just like I told you so. But and Jason, him and I are really good friends, so like he knew that, but like he mentored me through the whole process and was like, hey man, so the knowledge that guy has when it comes to stage design, thinking of how a match flow, production value was one of the big things I took away from it. I've always heard him talk about that because we've gone to other places all around the country and shot. Always, and even his own matches he talks about that. So huge shout out to Zoo City Army. All those, there's much more of those guys that make that whole place run. So huge shout out to them. Hutch, man, I love him to death. Like helped me out a lot too, like getting supplies, stuff like that. Dave Harris, all the ROs, freaking Sure, but the Griffin Group. Man, this list just goes on and on. Dave Harris, I think I already said him. Freaking Jay Schaff, man, I really felt bad because he deserves shout out ceremony and just man, there's so many people. He was out there. There was a list of stuff I had because it needed to happen at the range, and he went out, freaking found like the pad for the fast ropes. Guys, if they fell, competitors, they didn't break their necks. A lot of there was like some trees and stuff that needed to be cut down, and like he was just out there. He's like, "What do you need? What do you got?" And was out there doing a lot of that stuff that it helped with making everything look good. It was yard work and stuff, but they were procuring supplies. It took a lot off my plate. So Jay Shaw.
I think we just lost him. Oh,
There you guys are. Where'd you last hear me at?
procuring supplies.
Oh yeah. So,
Jay.
yeah, Jay helped out a lot in that. All the sponsors, I mean, that list is long. I can't thank them enough for that. Oh man, the third group command team for putting the pressure where it needed to be at and making it happen, getting it approved. All the competitors, huge shout out to them for showing up, and being out there and supporting it, because they're what makes this thing keep going, and that's what it's all for. Yeah, obviously Matt, like Donna said, was helping out with the price there because I was sitting there actually contemplating like, how can I get up there and grab it for, and then man, I don't know, I hate because I know there's like some people I'm leaving off, but
Same.
yeah, I mean, just the three gun. Yeah, like the three gun community as a whole, like thank you guys, because it just wouldn't have happened without you. Other than
So I got a list of shout outs that I'd like to do as well. Donna and JK, you are selfless individuals who gave a lot of time, sacrificed a lot, and put a lot on the line. And you guys knocked it out of the park. It was a wonderful experience, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. Chris Hutchison, I have to thank you. You let me stay at your house, invited me in to be with your family. You were an amazing friend, and I'm looking forward to hanging out with you in the future. Third group, you guys were absolutely awesome. It was great to hang around you guys, the ones that were on my squad, and just, be able to help and coach. It was truly a really great experience. Jay Schaff, he was on my squad, and I know he's gotten many mentions, and that's just a testament to his character. And him and I became even closer while at that match. We met last October at a match up in West Virginia, and then we ran into each other at Memorial, and then talked a lot at Battle for the South. And like being on a squad with him again, it was really great, and we really solidified a friendship. And this past weekend we hung out at 3-Man 3-Gun, and it was cool. Darren from Red Stitch Targets, I got to give a shout out to him. He provided some targets, but he's a solid individual, solid dude, good friend. I gotta say, I picked the Speedbox cooler up off the table.
Yay.
I've already had quite a bit of beers out of it, so it's getting its use. Lunchbox and Dave Steinbeck from Maxim Defense. You guys are awesome. I've known you since I started shooting, and thank you for everything that you provided to the Duskin 3-Gun match. And the last is the ROs. You guys knocked it out of the park with every call that you had to make, with the time on your feet that you spent, and just for being true professionals out there. Thank you. This match would not have happened without you. And JK shares the same sentiments. He was in tears at the end of the match, and you guys just really killed it. So thank you for coming on here. Thank you for everything. Does anybody have any last things they'd like to mention or say?
Thank you, Matt, for this opportunity. Nothing gets me more stoked than of anything in my life, like something I'm so passionate about, and thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about it, because it's like one moment in time that you wish you could keep reliving over and over again. And so yeah, thanks for the opportunity to kind of give a behind the scenes look.
Absolutely, and we'll definitely be doing this again.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'd like to echo this is I appreciate you having us on here, Matt. I know we talked prior to the Duskin happening. We were trying to, do a podcast before it kicked off, and I really wanted to do one, but it was just like a whirlwind. Don and I even talked about it. We didn't have time. I think we did, but we could have just managed it a little bit better, which is one of the lessons learned for next year. But definitely look forward to next year. Actually, Don and I've already started talking about it and brainstorming stuff. So it's gonna be a good experience. And then going back to the shout outs, I can't cover everybody, but man, two guys that they showed up to range 65, totally volunteered, told me they didn't have to be there if they didn't want to, because they're cadre that are coming on the committee to help me out. But Madison Brady and Tyler Clausing, those dudes are some workhorses, and they were out there every day. And I told them, I was like, hey man, it'd be like 1900, like, if you want to go home, because if you're waiting on, whenever I'm leaving, you're going to be out here a hot minute. And those guys got families and stuff like that. But insurmountable the help that they provided, helped out. And then Michelle Joy, my girlfriend, she helped out so much in so many different ways. So I can't really, not give her any credit due where it's at.
I wanted to mention her, and I totally was drawing a blank on her name, but she was a huge help. It was great to have her blessing to steal her guy for, a couple months, and she didn't kill me. So,
hey, Duskin, husband and wife.
We have the keychain to make it official.
Well, thank you both of you. Listeners, I hope you really enjoyed this. Hope you have an opportunity to come out next year. Really looking forward to seeing everything that occurs. Have a great one.